Yeah, so before we do that, we will start with Gordon and then we'll jump into things.
This is 20 years ago. This is the only picture we found from the conference back in the day. You can recognize some people. There is Louis up in the corner. There's Stefan right there. Yves, the infamous Yves Gingras on the left will tell you that Templeton is Scotia. And somebody else in the center. And I think this is on the boat. We actually rented a boat last time, and we went out in the ocean, and there was music and dancing, and none of the Cambridge people are here because they're over there networking on the other side of the boat. This is a great picture. Now, just a couple of words before we get going. Thanks to everybody who online and take part. It's a real experiment trying to figure out whether we can do this kind of thing, whether in the future we can actually use translation tools to be able to move across languages and not be so Anglo-centric, and while others that the tools are improving. I wanted to thank 1 billion people, which I don't have time, so I'm just going to run the credits.
We can see your name there. Thank you.
Music, and some crazy credits. You think about this stuff. Thanks 1 billion. Of course, a couple other thanks to our student, or maybe our crack student. They're not on crack, right? And the most important thing, a special over the top, thanks to the Wonder team of I want you to know that Dr. Facilitator is the head of our department, and while trying to negotiate how the program will go into the next year and everything else, all this is organized by Dr. Facilitator and Megan Krampa. All of it done, like the program, the washing of dishes, driving people from the airport. It is all humbling and incredible, and I don't know what. This week, cheers.
We need to thank Gordon because he found the money to feed everyone and house a bunch of people and fly a bunch of people in. So thank you for that.
The project wasn't just to celebrate 20 years of circulating and what has happened since, but it's been a kind of exercise, hopefully, you've seen from our plenary speakers, especially our keynote plenary at the beginning, of the kind of issues that we have to face now if we're going to continue to try to figure out how the connections between places and people and things can reconfigure and redo a story about the multiple modernities and the origin of science. We built the conference around 3 aspects. You could see that the sessions kind of shaped out in that area, but not exactly on research, translation, and pedagogy. And we want to, I guess, in the last bit, think about both the things that we've encountered here, and you guys will run it like however, but also on ways to make this kind of encounter not just the one-shot conference that you often go to and make individual networks, but rather try to figure out whether we can assign tasks and figure out ways of bringing something like this forward. In preparation, is Thomas Haddad on the thing? Okay, Thomas Haddad from the International Union for the History and Philosophy of Science, Division of History of Science and Technology, is one of our co-sponsors. And if he comes on the line, we're going to get him to speak about the New Zealand conference coming up. And part of what we were doing today is shaking the ground to see if something like this could be replicated in the International Union, because flying all the way to New Zealand is not such a great idea for every person on the planet. And hopefully he'll be on. If not, we can take over his institution or something like that. So Peter Lee and Sarah Phil has decided that, or not decided, have volunteered to take over this part of the discussion, and we can finish, and then I will give you some tips on what we can do. And by the way, this is a hurricane. Those that have from England and stuff like that, you don't experience it much. We thought it was going to hit us, so we kept very quiet as we watched the storm tracking up this way and going, oh, this is going to be great fun to do it in the dark. But it's gone to the side, and this is what you feel. There'll be a real wind and a lot of rain, and then it will stop completely, and tomorrow will be a wonderful day. It's a real interesting phenomenon of a hurricane. So I'm glad that we gave you Alfred, Marshall, and a hurricane. Albert? Take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Gordon, for giving me a reciprocal assignment. And to ask, where are we going from here? You remind me that I used to get quite a number of trips. Normally we go to a hub where we can make connection. The last connection I made was from Toronto. So I think our content here is more like a hub. And when we ask you folks, where do we go from here? So I'm sure we are getting many comments. And so to start with, may I ask Sarah to give you a little update about where we go.
Okay, so thank you so much for those of you who submitted your papers from yesterday. So I read through them and have provided a summary of some of the major working points, and I hope you're thinking as the session goes on. So one of the things that was across the board was more and then we have some actual outputs that we'll talk a bit more about, but we have opportunities to publish, whether it's in the BJHS, a issue from this workshop, whether it's to put together funding applications in your respective countries. We want to know what opportunities you will have. And also, if you want to be part of some of the conversations going on, you can let me know and we can continue from this point onwards. So there will be some continuity and we'll keep you posted. But we're hoping today that we'll hear a bit more. And so, okay, I have a question for you. There's two options for us to run this because I heard you yesterday when you said you wanted to talk to each other more. So we can either talk as a big group for 15 to 20 minutes, or you can talk to each other in small. Hands up for option A, which is we talk in a big group. Oh, so tough. Okay, I think we're a majority, but for the sake of it, option B. Okay. Those of you who are raising their hands, you're allowed to protest vote here. Okay, so I guess what we'll do then is I'll let Peter take it. And then we'll keep going.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. As you know, we have received 5 inputs. And I think they are all very relevant to our next action plan. So perhaps we should spend a bit time to go over those 5 points. And then we put all the gist together, and then we go from here. And as the representative from the Needham Foundation, I will be the last to add my 6th input.
Okay, so this means we're gonna use the roving mic that Gordon has. And so we're just gonna leave it as very informal where you can just go and we'll just do it in a popcorn manner. So who would like to start us off with a discussion on next steps based on what we've been talking about? All right, this is in the back. Sorry, I don't have everybody's names. I will try my best. So if I say this person, please don't mind. But you can.
So as international people will know from experience, Canada is actually a pretty good place to do history and philosophy of science. And it just so happens that CSHIPS, the Canadian Society for the History and Philosophy of Science, has a plant, actually 2 at the moment, because Melanie and I are the program chairs for next summer's meeting in Toronto. And I will tell you, you can submit abstracts singly, or even better, submit panels, right? So whole sessions, that, help to support this work. To see ships, of course, it will be evaluated, but there's a lot of support for international focuses. I think it's really the key program chairs got some power here. So please submit stuff, and if enough of you are there, then it ends up repeating this kind of really healthy interaction. So please consider submitting things. There was something else I need to mention that I know I forgot, but anyway, T-shirts, we want you. Come back. It's in Toronto. Yeah, so that makes it relatively easy to get to as these things go.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So C-SHIPS, Canadian Society for the History and Philosophy of Science, next year, Toronto. Anybody else who'd like to go next? And if you don't raise your hand, I'll make you talk in groups.
So textbooks. So I worry about, in the current moment, I worry about backlash. And I was struck by this idea that Vala talked about, that you have current authors going, oh yeah, you've got these separate things that you really that all happens in Europe anyway. And it seems to me that good introductory textbooks that say you cannot deny the international flow of scientific knowledge as central to the history of knowledge. It seems really important.
That's a really good point. I think we're going to Melanie next.
Yeah, so, after Ellen Marshall's text yesterday, and discussing, hearing Leslie talk, one discussion, I, realized that actually, in a big part of our work, we have to be, kind of a promotion of what history and philosophy of science does. So I don't say, okay, we need a fourth branch of but nothing in the research projects or partnerships, translation or individual aspects. It will happen a bit more stuff.
Thank you.
And yes, C-SHIPS is bilingual, that means French and English. So we want first historians, and we want French speakers.
Please, who else would like to contribute? Don't be shy. Online folks, please feel free to also raise your hands and we can bring you into the room. If not.
Bertrand McDonald, who is here, and certainly at the School of Management at Dalhousie, and it's for the science. Translations from across languages, in knowledge in general, but it'll also cover the history of knowledge as well. I haven't got the note because he gave it to me and then lost it. But we'll send that around to everyone.
Thank you. Yes.
No more feedback for point number one, we should have, wait a minute, I'm sorry.
Is that Jim good on you?
Yeah, I'm always happy. You started. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up the point about the focal things people have said so far about reaching different audiences, which I think is quite a core thing that you I think one thing that's really important to think about are the different media through which we reach people. I was just at the last session, talking to several people afterwards about the way in which, object biographies are one thing, but they do have some of the same problems that human biographies have. But exhibitions are a really good way, probably better in certain ways than straightforward linear narrative is, to actually present multiple perspectives, different possibilities, because of the way you walk through them. I often, when I write, I try and pretend that I'm in the enviable position of designing an exhibition, and there's ways in which you could approach the object in different forms and different ways and use it in that way. I think we all try and think that way a bit, but I think trying to think about evaluations, if we need to give more priority to some of these other forms. Also, it's very interesting last night, and in some ways, having an individual talk like that, having an exhibition, there was a kind of ceremonial aspect to that almost, which I think can be quite important. So I think there's ways of getting around. In the British Society's History of Science, we got a stand-up comedian kind of version of the history of science. I think there's just a whole different, which Sarah, I meant, is one of the stars. So I think there's a lot of different forms to use. I still am a big fan of books, but even those can be used in different, new and creative forms. So I think really thinking when we write both about, obviously there's the hurdle of the dissertation, but then thinking about the next stage is in a creative way, even if it is a book, you know, I think it can be very helpful. So yeah, that's really just a thought, but it's something I've been trying to think about.
Is it?
Yes.
From Martha there.
And big Danny. Okay, perfect. Danny, do you want to jump in and then we'll go to Marta's point?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Is that a yes? Sorry, I'm getting some glitchy audio on my end. So this actually builds a bit on Jim's point. I was thinking along the same lines about different kinds of formats. I don't think it has to be an either or question of the textbook, thinking about also Marta's comment here. I think that maybe multiple approaches would be the best way forward. So we could do a textbook. I think if we do a textbook, it should be open access. I also think we should think hard about the formats within a textbook along the lines of what Jim was saying. So for instance, on a project I worked with some Indigenous knowledge holders recently, we made sure that there were audio links to their actual voices telling their stories, because to put their words back into written text was something that they were not particularly keen on. They wanted to have the original audio and the quality of their voice as part of the communicative act. So thinking along those lines might push us towards online stuff as well. And I was thinking also about something that Leslie Cormack said, I think it was yesterday, possibly today, where she suggested that a really cool project would be to take, you know, an event or a phenomena and look at it from different perspectives. It strikes me that, say, the medium of a podcast would be really conducive to that kind of project. And it could even involve students, where we have students at different institutions doing different podcasts as a course, and then bringing it all together. So that's all just to say that I think I'm totally with Jim on thinking about alternative formats, and that I also endorse a multi-pronged approach forward.
Thank you, Danny. Marta, would you like to come online or just stay in the chat? You're welcome to. Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was reading the chat. Yeah, I was just suggesting on the pedagogy side of things, instead of writing a textbook from scratch, that there are taking a reader approach might be an intermediary step, or something that's more practical, that I have found that useful in teaching and seeing, you know, how other people have curated things that have been published that can be used. And so I offered some regional ways of organizing it yesterday, just because I riffing off of Fatih Fan's conclusion on Asia's method. But I think there are many other ways that I'm not going to spell out right now that people brought up in talks and sessions that could be used. So that's my main point.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, we briefly lost you there, but I think we got the key points. Yeah.
So if no further input, we move on to point 2.
point number 2 is intel gathering. We'd like to hear more about funding bodies and funding opportunities you can think of. So, this may be just, where you're from, what you think you can apply for, what kind of grants are available, on a larger scale. Where you can see this going, or even a smaller project that can tie into a bigger project. So if anybody has any experience or suggestions about funding bodies, that would be.
I always do.
But I wonder what the status with European grants in Britain now. Is Brexit?
No, that's okay. It's okay. They finally listed that.
Yeah, so this was the real worry, right?
But those are obviously very large grants in European funds. There are issues about getting smaller sums and where you get them from. That is a problem. It's not, Brexit, in fact, that is the particular issue. It is going to solve.
What you did it.
Not yet. Not yet. Yeah, Canada's got SHIRK. European money is there. Any other places you can see somebody hosting a large scale project or even smaller scale, or even funding for a workshop in the future. And you can always share them later if.
And there must be a lot of money in Hong Kong. Theater.
I will come back when they come to my turn.
Yeah, well, yeah, so I think with that, just keep that in mind and you can just get it with us. So we'll move to point number 3, if that's okay. Yeah, and Jim sort of started talking about this. Point number 3 was public engagement and moving beyond the classroom. So if anybody has, I mean, we all had a really good suggestion. We had some about from Danny as well. So I know a lot of these are overlapping and it's good, but we're just focusing on now the public. Megan has.
I actually have a point from point 2 because I was trying rapidly to try and find it and I found it,
Good.
which is for Canada based folks. There is a organization initiative called Digital Museums Canada. And they fund projects for digitization sort of things. So for example, I'm looking on their main page in which their funded projects include footprints in time, tracking dinosaurs in British Columbia, shipwrecks of the Great Lakes, science, national and civic identity, and tourism at the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory, Victoria, BC. And I'm pretty sure they fund people with like $1 million for some projects, and I'm like, whoa. So, if anyone, I feel like some of the stuff is very history of science based. If you may need possibly an affiliation with like a museum or something, but we have some museum folks that have participated in this conference. And yeah, it's an opportunity if you can think outside the box and maybe make an application and see if they will give you money. I wish they would give me money, so.
Thank you, Megan. Yes.
No, we got.
Not.
So I just want to address your point. I did a project with Digital Museums in Canada. The thing is, you have to have a university affiliation, and you can't, and they do give you nice sums of money, but you need a PI who is attached firmly with tenure to an institution.
That's an important note, and then we'll go into that.
So right, this is for the online, I think it helps with the online people, we use the slide, right?
Yeah. Unless you speak really loudly, which, to be fair, Letitia, your captioning is working fine for you.
Okay, I will continue to be very loud.
Excellent.
So just for people who track this, there's this thing, the conversation, like that does knowledge translation to the general public. And I mean, I wrote something for it and it has, at least the stats say it's been read a lot. Probably the most read thing, I mean, 100 people max anything else a month. So it's not saying much, but I think if you can make it current if you can get a good tagline, it's probably something where historians can take original research and insight with current relevance and get it to a general audience, and you can always link to your papers in that. And so it can be a path to important stuff. And I think lots of institutions, I don't know where, but certainly in Canada, the United States, and I suspect there are other places too, have this as a thing.
Thank you, and right to Melanie next. I like this duo.
Ever co-chair. I'm putting back actually to, the funding opportunities. I think, so with the way we have to think about this, I think it's in stages. Because, well, that's how Canada, the, short, funding agency works. So, it's going first for partnership engagement, which is held for 1 year, and basically allows you to do a workshop to start working on your partnership development grant, which can be held for 3 years and brings a bit more money, and allows you to work on your partnership grant, which was basically what started Civilisation finance, and which brings a lot more money, and can be held up to 7 years. Now, to go for those grants, we need like actual skin in the game support from a number of Canadian institutions. So we need people from the large Canadian institutions to step in for this way, and from international partners. So without both, that's not going to get off the ground. But with both, there's lots to do here. And Gordon knows how to do it, right? Doesn't do it well.
Anymore. I'd just like to pick up on what Gordon said a few minutes ago about me, which was not entirely accurate, so. I've been actively involved with another association called the Society for History of Authorship, Reading and Publishing, or SHARP, S-H-A-R-P. And SHARP does publish a translation journal which addresses the questions that have been raised here. It's an open access journal called Lingua Franca, and it's intended entirely to ensure that scholarship around the world is going to be accessible to others who are unable to read the languages in which the scholarship is being funded. That might serve as a model for this group. Historians of science also participate in SHARP, and not as many as I would like, since I come from that sort of background. Another observation, this is with regard to who are your audiences. I've worked with the science policy index. I've worked with very contemporary issues around issues of how information reaches decision makers. And one of the tools that's used frequently within that context are policy briefs or briefing notes. Those are 2 pages and maybe a little bit longer than that. You want to reach that audience, that's what you need to use. Not lengthy papers that they can try to read, but explaining the amount of research. And I would say that perspectives that are addressed here are definitely needed in that context. So think about an audience which is in the public policy arena or in the management arena of government, because there are many people who work in government departments who do not have the time to read what you're publishing, but they can benefit from what you have learned. And that's where you use the tool of the policy briefing or reading.
Great, thank you so much. I'm liking the points, men, actually.
Point, so when people are something in the conversation, does that get picked up in some policy briefing?
I would say the conversation is actually a great tool because it is relatively brief and it's often gets republished in multiple other venues because it's an open access process. So yes, that definitely works. Policy briefs are more independent as independent units as opposed to the ongoing publication conversation, of which there are multiple versions around the world. So it does serve as a venue.
I think we're good to submit a 2-page summary of this event to you.
Just very quickly add to that, in a conversation piece, they want links to evidence. And you can put your policy document over 2-page dumbed-down overview there, along with the full paper that shows its original research.
It's a shortcut of policy, we can read it in policy, we should be on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's short, but they do get taken up by like newspapers.
We're just gonna go to Martin's comment in the chat, going back to the pedagogy side of things, which was number 4, so it slides in really nicely. Again, some of the research projects presented could fit with the Oxford University Graphic History series, for medical colonial history example, Michael G. Van and Liz Clark's The Great Rat, Hunt, Empire, Disease, Modernity, and French colonial Vietnam. Yeah, I think that's a really good example, but that is a great segue into pedagogy and resources. So I think we've talked a bit about what we could publish, what we could translate, but what's the purpose in a pedagogical sense? What is useful? I've heard a lot of people say translations will help them teach, but they also need to be contextualized. And I will go to Arvin.
Yeah, okay. You know, I'm actually referring to what Jim Seacock raised about exhibitions are better than linear narratives, you know, based on that idea. I was thinking that if we are having exhibitions about cross flows of ideas across civilizations, one institution that might be interested in it, though I do not know, would be the Asian Civilizations Museum in Singapore. Okay. Because when I say we, I'm just a Singaporean, but you know, but the Asian Civilization Museum is very much committed to exhibitions of Asian civilization, generally Chinese, Indian, Islamic, okay, and Southeast Asian, but they and always they try to make sure that these different cultures get represented over time because they are the cultures of Singapore. So there is a commitment to this kind of multiculturalism rather than inter-civilizational dialogue. You know, exhibitions of the different civilizations so that people can learn about them. And this also contributes to Singapore's, whatever you want to call it, national policy orientation, harmony, and things like that, which is a very big thing there. Okay. Now, what I think is really interesting would be, I am not involved with them, you know, I mean, I know people there, but it doesn't mean that I have any scope to reach out, but I think, and I've argued this before, you know, in Singapore, well, various journals, that it would be very good to see how the different civilizations engage each other, you know, and created a scientific culture. I think there would be great receptivity to that. Okay, so this would be something that, well, I'm with the Joseph Needham Foundation for Science and Civilization also, which is committed to the same idea. Okay, but the Asian Civilizations Museum would not be interested in articles and papers and things like that. They need exhibits, you know, real exhibits, because they are museum. But they could be, in the case of exhibitions, they could be something, you know, an institution that might be, well, worth approaching.
Are you volunteering, Arvin? Are you volunteering?
Yeah, I would say, yes, I would approach them. I can't guarantee anything. Okay, but I could approach them and try to get them, you know, whoever is there. I do not know who the director is or, you know, people there. But I think it would be definitely of interest to Singapore.
I mean, I'm gonna call on Josh for the Whipple. Would something like that, what would it take to have a sort of rotating exhibit? Because we have the Canadian connection, we have Singapore. I'm just curious, like, how would that act? If you're in the line of sight and stuff.
Sure, yeah. I've been sitting here thinking, could I say something? One of the reasons I didn't want to is that impressing me with my kind of practical museum hat on. Exhibitions are incredibly difficult to do across a large range of people and institutions unless you have a huge amount of money. And that's because an exhibition using just one collection costs, let's say, A amount. An exhibition using collections from more than one institution is normally either A to the power 3 or A to the power 4, maybe A to the power 10. I mean, it just gets so much more expensive to do anything across collections because museums have really often frustratingly strict rules about what anything happens to make the costs escalate. So I've done exhibitions in my own museum to try and address some of the themes that I'm interested in the history of science and global context. But I could borrow in, I think, 3 objects. That was all I could afford, and everything else had come from my collection. So whatever you want to do with an exhibition has to start with money. Unfortunately, obviously it also has to start with the institution that wants to do it. And then you get to the problem that you want the life of that exhibition to extend beyond just, say, 3 months that it's in one place. Because then your audiences are always naturally going to be limited. And then you get to this vexing problem that I've discussed with multiple people here over the course of the last few days of what can you do online with these kinds of ideas? Because there is an inherent contradiction, in a sense, having an online exhibition of objects. It feels often quite limited and frustrating. But on the other hand, it is the best way to immediately be able to engage audiences globally. So I would urge people to think creatively about what can be done online and online only, because then you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds loading objects left, right, and centre. And even if it's difficult, I think it can be done.
Thank you, that was very helpful.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we have put this virtual museum as an exhibition, as a test ground. We're going to see how it expands. If we get enough money to be able to sustain it, we do need money because they cost a bit for the curator, student curators. So we're going to have to troll around for that. We run out of money very soon, just as it's getting going. The other thing we did with the Situated Science cluster is we actually took an object and toured it across the country, along with speakers at the sites where it ended up. We used one of the objects was a boy, and David Canfield, he gave a talk here. He gave a talk in with the boy tour, I guess. And it really worked well because there was so different interpretations of it in different sites. And it was really creative to take an object and have it do circulating. And with talks done on that object from place to place. And you can also make that a virtual thing as well. There was
Melanie.
To add to what Jonathan was saying, the advantage of an online exhibit can become part of the learning. Your translations of text and you can bring images and text and different kinds of media together. Because if there's something you've seen again and again as conferences, that often the knowledge is not transmitted in a text. It's transmitted through practices or an object, and so having all of them come together is quite useful.
Thank you. I'm just gonna add 0.5 to the table, so Peter also has time for 0.6. And 0.5 is collaborating with other disciplines. And so if anybody would like to suggest other disciplines that we can collaborate with,
huge potential for collaboration in this with anthropology, obviously, but then also the subfield known as the ethnosciences. I mean, they may sometimes seem antiquarian, but they are a very dynamic disciplinary field as well. And it's really quite fun once one gets into that literature, see what kind of results they produce. It's not just listing the plant species known by XYZ. It's can be much richer. It's an untapped source, because I think we're moving as a discipline more and more towards the history of knowledge, but I don't think we've really developed the tools the structures of everyday knowledge and so-called indigenous knowledges. I think that's where.
You've given me an idea, Stefan, which is like starting a reading group called Reading Across Disciplines. But we can do that online. Megan was next. So that's a really good point. I think it's just reading through that literature to get those ideas would be a very interesting one. Thank you.
I feel I would be remiss, considering I am theoretically at Dalhousie now doing a master's in the same department as Bertram McDonald, to not encourage people to reach out to information studies, information science. And this is because they really like data. And they've got this new field of study that is primarily, and of course, bibliometrics. It sounds very intriguing, I'm sure. And it's essentially doing those citation mappings. And also within information is the very concept of how we relay information, whether that is through cataloging, record keeping, but also within the contents itself, citations, all this sort of things. Yeah, how we document things is like a key issue in the information field currently. And I think as we are thinking about how to decolonialize, restructure all of our concepts, especially around a field in which it seems like it is very objective. There's a lot of interesting work being done in the information subfields and fields as well.
Brilliant, that's a really good point. I'm just going to point out Danny's point, another area of collaboration being teachers for high school. So I think that's a really good point to note down. Yeah.
I was going to piggyback off of Danny's point as well. I think education, and particularly trying to work on teaching outside of the university classroom, trying to influence other levels of education. Even going to a PTA meeting and just being very uncompromised is a chance, because part of our discipline is dealing with what people's expectations about science are, and that can be connected to earlier school education. So, yeah.
That's a good point. I'm going to move us to point 6 to make sure Peter has enough time before we wrap up. So Peter, point 6.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And now I just want to share a few points. First of all, thank my colleagues, Dr. Bala, for alerting the importance of this content here. And you can imagine, from the title of the evolving topic, is a very small scale, but it could be potentially exponential scale. And then remind me, during my brief association with Joseph Needham, and I asked him a question. I said, when you finish the XCC series, you have any idea where do we go from here? I said, sure. We have not touched base on Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and then on to Central Asia. And he said, don't you worry, we just need more people in Scott. And so our evolving participation in this conference give me a lot of inspiring intuition that perhaps this is the beginning of how we can participate in the future. It may not be exactly in synergy with your overall title, but should be very close to it. So what I'm trying to explain is when Paula was talking about Asian civilization. Now you can see we have not touched base on Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, and South Asia and so forth. And we're talking about indigenous civilization. So I can assure you that our foundation based in Hong Kong will look at this from a macro scale point. And I can also express my gratitude to Gordon, organizer, Melanie, in our AGM on September 23rd, which will be next month in Hong Kong. So I share that commitment with you today, and thank you so much again.
Thank you, Peter. I'll give it back to Gordon for anything to add.
I want to say something at the very end when you're done with us.
Okay, so let's do one final room, yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, this thing.
Comment, and so we are talking about like funding and now after especially after the COVID-19, there are a lot of new changes with these current equipment and tools, and so where especially if we extend this scope into more global, and we actually encounter a lot of challenges because many funding, for example, like Korea. Yeah, there are funding, but they would like us to focus on one region. And so for example, in Korea, we can only get funding if we really focus on Korea, then we can really it's difficult for us to look at things objectively and globally, and so I have similar issues with my social project. And so we are, of course, we can do our best to for getting more funding to really make things really nicely, but we can also think about some really smart ways to save money and do many useful things using limited funding. And for example, where maybe like now really libraries are spending their resources, and so for example, each library has resources, but we really share many resources in other libraries. So for example, I really want some kind of collection, a list of collections, and where we can Google it. This like university and really like the East Asia or Science or in another library. They have something that's not enough in other libraries. So we can share this kind of list and then resources, and these online things are really free, and we can also build on that for further really meaningful and very practical information. Thank you.
That's a really good point, where we can still get local funding, how to put it into the global context and have it smaller things. We have one comment in the back, like Melanie, or, okay, so we'll go both here, and then to Melanie.
Yeah, sorry, just one point on the collaboration aspect. I was very happy to see this is a very international conference. But I think that especially in the global south, there's a lot of scholars who are a bit isolated, and if they're not working in the one main university that has like the toggle to book a website in English, it's kind of hard to reach them if you don't know the language. So I know there's a bit of barrier there. But you know, I'm aware of a lot of scholars in Mexico, for instance, that if they're not in the one university that's like well known internationally, you know, they would know about this conference or about the History of Science Society meeting happening in Mexico, ironically. So yeah, and I spread the word around as much as I could. But you know, it is so hard, but making that effort really does make a difference for them, I think. Well, and you know, Canada has a lot of international students who speak 2 languages. I'm sure it is the same in a lot of other countries. Rely on us, ask us to translate, send emails to departments where it's, you know, you maybe don't have a connection with, or you can't speak the language. I think those people would be so happy to be here.
Thanks.
That's a brilliant point.
Did you?
This is complete wow. I feel terrible going after that wonderful comment because I just wanted to point out, thinking about how this conference happened, I think there's 2 people that we have not thanked yet. And this conference, the hybrid version of this conference would literally not have been possible had Letitia Manel and Andrew Fenton not, you know, procured the owls and computers for us, sometimes at the very, very last minute. And I am eternally grateful to them because this owl, like the owls have been working impeccably this whole time. And we obviously at King's don't have the capacity to own 4 owls that Housey does. So I just want to express on behalf of the whole team, how grateful we are for that collaborative aspect. And to Andrew Fenton, well, okay, Andrew Fenton, but also Letitia Manel, even though she's saying she didn't do anything, she is putting it in her car.
Excellent.
You are literally she is transporting and transmitting knowledge, and the knowledge is
Material culture is important. Thank you so much, both of you.
Even though they won't do,
Yes.
even one day they won't hear us, things of very small institutions. And you know, people from the advancement office, the registrar's office, the bursar's office, all contributed a lot to this conference. You're not seeing it, but they have been instrumental. Without them, no one would be here. Facilities, everybody contributed. So a big thank you for King's, which is just a great institution to be. I'm so lucky. And finally, one last final request. The Cosmolocal website will keep going. There's now the Join Me project page that has started to be filled. Please send me your new projects, whether you're starting a new grant, whether you want to translate a book and need a co-translator, or want to organize a panel for the Sea Ship in Toronto next summer. Send us our requests. We're going to post them for you there.
Perfect. And with that note, we can hand it to Gordon to say the final comments so we stay on time.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. Avoid the storm. Some people are going to Salties.